So there are a couple concepts from Chapter 13 that I want to call your attention to particularly, and they fall on pages 409 to 413, and those are things like calculating percent change, trend, and common size analyses. So these are fairly basic financial tools and concepts that you really have to understand in order to evaluate a financial position for a department or an organization. So I'm going to use a very basic example to illustrate how conceptually you would interpret this data, as well as mechanically how you would perform these actions in Excel. So you'll see my spreadsheet here contains 1 quarter's worth of data, the first quarter, January through March, for some organization, and it includes some GL expense lines of office supplies, pharmaceuticals, and med-surg supplies. Clearly, this is a very simplified example. And you can see the various dollar amounts that are associated with each of those 3 categories for each of the 3 months. So when we're talking about trend analysis can also be referred to as horizontal analysis, where you're looking at changes over time and really trying to determine the financial performance or kind of the patterns in spend or profitability. So you can eyeball this data and kind of get an understanding from a trend perspective. The trend for office supplies is in the upward direction, right? It's starting in January at 150, ending up in March at 170, and February's numbers are obviously greater than January's and less than March. So you can see kind of mentally in your mind a graph would have an upward slope there. Pharmaceuticals is the same thing, where you have an upward slope. Med-surg supplies is a little bit interesting. It's going down from January to February, but then from February to March it's increasing. So there might be some trends that we need to look into deeper in that expense line. So a trend, remember, is looking across time, looking at patterns in spend or profitability, just to get a sense of the movement, the financial movements of your business. So through that was just kind of an eyeballing, but you can also calculate percentage changes that speak very specifically and numerically to those trends, which is what we're going to do next. So it's a very simple formula to calculate percentage change, but it can trip some people up, so I want to make sure we go over it. Here's the formula over here. What you have to do in Excel is you have to take the new data minus the old data. That difference you have to divide by the old data. What do I mean by new and old? Well, so let's calculate the percentage change from January to February. So February, since that would be the most recent month that would have ended when you compare it against January, February is considered your new, and January would be considered your old. So the formula would be equal sign. You must have the parentheses because you need the difference of the January and February figures. So this would be February, which is new, minus January, which is old. You're going to close the parentheses because you want the difference of the two, divided by the old, which is the January figure. So you get 0.033. Now we learned in the Excel Basics formula or Excel Basics tutorial that you can format cells, change that to a percentage. Maybe we want 1 decimal place. And now we know that there was a 3.3% increase from January to February. So we can do the same for February to March, and now our new and old references change. So equal sign, open parentheses, the new now, when you're looking at February and March is the most recent, so that's the new. That's 170 minus the old, which is February, 155, close parentheses, divided by the old, which is February, 155. So the percentage change here, if we format cells, you can see there is a 9.7% increase from February to March. Now, if we do the same for the other ones, again, open parentheses, new minus old, close parentheses, divided by old. You can see there, and we'll just go ahead and format cells, percentage, and you can see here there was a 70% increase from January to February. And you do have to do a gut check. Does 70% make sense? It does, because it went from 1,000 to 1,700. I mean, you can calculate the difference there pretty simply. That's 700. Well, 700 out of 1,000, that's a pretty big deal. That's a 70% increase. So that mathematically makes sense. It conceptually makes sense. And you always want to do a gut check on yourself to see if the percentage changes that you're calculating mathematically look correct in relation to the trends that you see visually on the screen. So now let's do what the percentage change looks like for med-surg supplies going in the opposite direction, just to make sure that conceptually we get a negative sign for when we go from February to March for med-surg supplies. So we're going from February to March, which means, open parentheses, what is the old? The old is, what's the new? Minus the old, 378, minus the 400, divided by the old, which is 400. And there you can see we do have a negative sign, meaning that we decreased. Our percentage change is negative 5.5% change in med-surg spending from February to March of this particular quarter. Now what I'd like to do is extend this, and you can certainly do it for these other two. I'm not going to do it here in this video. I'm also going to do a common size analysis. And all common size analysis is looking at, from a vertical standpoint, it's also called vertical analysis, looking at the proportion. So when we look at the month of January and we look across these various categories of supply spending, we would like to know, well, what percentage of our total supply spending went to pharmaceuticals? Or what percentage of our total supply spending went to med-surg supplies? So that proportional analysis of looking at where the biggest opportunities are for spend consolidation or expense reduction, that's where common size analysis comes into play. Common size analysis, again, is kind of a percentage calculation, but not percent change. It's a percent proportion. So to do that, it's very simple. What we're going to do is first we need a total figure. So we're going to sum. You can use auto sum as well, or manually type the prompt for sum. So you need to know what the total supply spend is. So this 1690 represents 150 plus 1000 plus 540. I'm going to add a new column here so that we can see how much of January's office supplies spend was as a proportion of all supply spend in January. So for that, we do equals January's office supply spend divided by all supply spend for January. We're going to do absolute referencing because we want to lock in the 1690. And I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to format cells. And you can see here 8.9%, almost 9% of my monthly spending in January for supplies went for office, whereas 59% went towards pharmaceuticals and 32% went towards med-surg supplies. So let me just do those keystrokes again for you. If I do the auto sum here, calculate the proportion of February's supply spend in relation to all supply spend for February. And you can see here the pharmaceutical supply spend was significantly greater this time, representing 3/4 of my monthly supply budget here in February. 75.4% went towards purchasing pharmaceuticals versus 6.9% for office supplies, etc. So you can see here common size really looks at proportionality. This comes in really handy when you're looking at targeting cost reduction or targeting revenue enhancement opportunities to really drill down on what areas consume more spending or which areas are the most profitable. It gives you kind of the top 10 or the top 5 listing very quickly because it prioritizes where managers should focus their attention. Again, I hope this was helpful. If not, please post a question to the Q&A forum. Thank you.